Hi there, Lockdown Diaries Day 41. Today I just wanted to talk about probably the one thing that worries everyone the most, and that is the bike breaking down on a trip. You know, how do you have faith in your machine, and what do you do if it goes wrong? And I've got to be honest, you can't mitigate against the bike going wrong. A bike can fail, it's a mechanical device. What I've learned over my travels and riding with other riders is the main thing always happens before the trip, and that is making sure the bike is fit and healthy for the journey. And I think importantly that starts with the bike choice to begin with. My experience, when I set off from Sydney, I set off on a bike that I bought off eBay. I did no servicing on it, I knew a spoke had broken. I didn't know at the time but the bottom end was on the way out, but if I'd have took it to anyone who knew, they would have told me that. And so I set off on a bike that was never going to make that trip. And it made it to Brisbane, where it was, the reality was made, and it was traded in for a pristine postie bike, and that carried me all the way to England. But the difference was night and day between those two bikes. And so what I learned from that was start with a healthy bike. Now, a healthy bike doesn't necessarily mean a brand new bike, but it just means a bike that, to me, has not been molested or changed or adapted or corrupted by the previous owner, that's got moderate miles. It doesn't have to be low miles, but I don't think high miles are a problem. It's how healthy the bike appears, how healthy it sounds, and how healthy the owner has treated that bike, really. And I think it's one of those soft skills which you gradually learn, or you just get a feel for a bike. If I was looking for a Himalayan, and when I was looking at this one, this had got 600 miles on it. It had had no changes by the current owner or the previous owner. I knew by buying that I was going to get a perfectly reliable or as good as new motorcycle. Alternatively, if I was looking for a Himalayan and one came across my path that had somebody who'd fitted auxiliary lights and chopped and changed bits and bobs, I would be weary or worried that somebody had almost put in problems that might occur further down the line. I think the problem with bikers is that a lot of people like to bodge things. And I think some people are more confident than they are capable. And I think a bike that's been chopped and changed around is probably not the bike I would start on. It's a bit like that Husqvarna TR650. That's the only bike I've had that's let me down on a trip. And I bought that on spec. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the detail. I just felt like I wanted to buy it, and I bought it one winter during winter blues. But it quickly transpired that the previous owner had bodged the forks, he'd bodged the electrics, there was a cut-off on the hose, the bit it had fueling or radiator issues. And so really, if I'd had a better look, I would have noticed that there were things amiss. So that weren't the right bike, and that bike ultimately let me down on a trip. So I think ultimately, look at what bike you're buying. Does it feel fresh? Does it feel healthy? Does it feel unmolested? And I would start with that. I personally do like the newer bike, simply because I know that the owner hasn't messed with it. Like people say, why don't you buy a Suzuki DRZ 400 instead of a Himalayan? Well, the reason I don't want a Suzuki DRZ 400 is because it's 10 years old, it's probably had 5 owners at least, and who knows what problems those owners have easily fixed or bodge fixed or changes that they've made that might weaken the reliability of the bike. Starting with a bike that's box fresh, unchanged, is always a better bet than starting with a bike that's been molested by a previous owner. And then that comes on to a few key elements that I want to just go quickly around on the bike that I will check before setting off. So starting with the oil, obviously you're going to check the oil. You're going to hopefully have a feel for what consumption your bike has. The Himalayan used as a bit, or it used a bit from Bulgaria. So on that trip, stupidly, I'd not taken any top-up oil, and so I had to borrow some off a rider along the way. That was a schoolboy error. But on the trips that I've guided, I've had 3 bikes fail due to a lack of oil. One was a Sinis 125 and 2 C90s, which didn't make it down to Land's End, simply because the owners didn't check the oil. So if you are riding, especially a small capacity bike, which uses oil on long stretches of open throttle, keep an eye on that oil, because that will go against you when it's empty. And once your engine's seized, then, game over, I'm going home. And that's what they had to do there, to go home and swap it actually for more reliable bikes. I mean, of about the 300 or 350 bikes that I've had with me on various trips, I've probably had 6 failures. Those 3 with the oil. I've had Tiger 1050 that had got rear wheel bearing issues that arrived at Land's End, and we managed to find somebody who could fix them for him. We had an MZ that didn't make it out of Cornwall because she'd bought a £500 junker online, so obviously that was a bad place to start. I had a V-Strom 1000 that killed its alternator up in Scotland. Again, like a 10-year-old bike, and I guess that's my worry with the sort of 10-year-old bikes, that they're finally starting to have things fail on them, which aren't always visible until they fail. And I guess that's my reluctance with a slightly older bike. That's, to me, if you can afford a 3-year-old bike, that's kind of like the perfect compromise. And it's particularly why I like these A2 bikes, simply because for the price of, for not a lot of money, you can get a new bike, like a GS310. You can buy one of them a year or 2 old for £3,500, and you're not really going to have any problems with it. Probably not the most exciting bike, but you've not spent a huge amount of money, but you've got reliability. So that's a trade-off. Other things to check, obviously tyres. You want to make sure you're setting off with enough tyre tread for the trip that you've got in mind. I've made the mistake before. I was guiding a trip Land's End to John O'Groats, and I left Land's End about 40 miles into the trip, realised that my tyres were never going to make it, and I was an idiot for even trying, so I had to detour off and get a set of tyres fitted on a trip that I was guiding, which was hugely embarrassing and easy to avoid. But it's a mistake we've all made or can make, and so I would certainly say, if in doubt, just get new tyres fitted, take off the part worns, and then refit the part worns when the other ones have worn out. So it's not like you're wasting tread, it's just saving yourself the hassle of having to change tyres along the route. Also, by keeping an eye on your tyres, it also allows you to check the spokes, and spokes are always worth keeping an eye on. If you have to just tighten a few up or whatever, or if you've got a broken one, it's always good to spot, because once you've got one broken one becomes 2, 2 becomes 3, 3 becomes 4, 4 becomes a problem. So it also equally comes back to the fact of keeping a bike clean. I know obviously this is slightly against that grain, but if you keep a bike clean, you are generally on top of basic problems like loose fasteners or broken spokes or weeping, oil leaks and things like that. This notion that an adventure bike has got to be dirty is just nonsense, because dirtiness hides problems which might bring your trip to a halt. So keep your bikes clean for a start is always the best, or one of the best ways of avoiding issues. So tyres, oil. Next one, you're going to go chain and sprockets, aren't you? You're going to want to know that you've got enough chain and sprocket life left in there. You want to make sure adjustment is right. If you've got an oil fitter, oil luber, you want to get that fitted and set up so it's dripping correctly. But the thing that's going to cook a train is running it dry. So, dry, wrong tension, and under constant load. It's soon going to cook it. It's going to cook your sprockets, and then once that happens and you're out on the road, problems. I mean, on the Sydney-London trip, I never looked behind this. I was naive. I never looked at my front sprocket until Kyrgyzstan, when I had to take this off to investigate an oil leak, and I noticed that my sprocket was absolutely killed. It got barely 1,000 miles left in it, if that. And if it hadn't have been spotting it then, it would have eventually given up in the middle of nowhere. So it's always important to pick out that. And that's it, really. As chain, brake pads, let's say. When you've got your wheel out changing your tyre, you're going to have a look at your brake pads. Make sure you've got brake pads that have got enough life in them. Tyres, kinks, leaks, spot as you go along. And then really, that's it. That's all you can do. That's the only preventative measure you can do, other than things that are specific to your bike. So for the Himalayan, for example, the headstock bearings dry up. So before a big trip, you might want to strip them and re-grease that. The linkages on the suspension, they can dry up. So you might want to strip that out, put some grease through that. But that's only going to come when you follow the owner's forums and know what particular problems a bike has. I think, for me, I wouldn't investigate or fix problems that weren't there. There was somebody on the forum the other day saying, I'm about to do a trip. The book advises that I should have new clutch plates on at this point in time. What should I do? Should I get new clutch plates? And personally, if the bike is running fine and there's no problem with the clutch, then leave the clutch as it is. Because by trying to fix something, sometimes problems can be injected into the situation. So I would just leave it as it is, and if you are worried about the clutch, then take spare clutch plates with you, but don't disturb the bike for the sake of something that's not wrong. Everyone's different on that. Some people will say, well, preventative maintenance is better than the alternative, but for something like clutch plates or anything else, I would just take the spare and change it if I needed to, because you don't know what's going to happen. He's changing the clutch, and somebody threads a bolt, or and then they've got a big job of getting that out, or they put the clutch plates in wrong, or they don't tighten something down, and then you've got problems which you never otherwise would have had. But I think fundamentally it comes back to the fact that you've got to start with a bike that you feel confident in. And if you don't have confidence in a bike, then I don't know what you can do really, other than fixing the issues that particularly worry you, or ultimately trading it to something that does give you confidence. And again, it is why these A2 bikes, I enjoy them, because they offer newness for not a huge amount of money and outlay. And for me, that gives me huge peace of mind. Now these Himalayans, I set off across America. I didn't take any spare parts, bar cables, clutch and throttle, just because there'd been a few prone to snapping on there. So I took those, but I didn't take anything else, because it's a new bike, and it's just unlikely to go wrong. So for me, the bikes that have let me down or let riders on my trips down are generally the old, I've got to be honest, the older Japanese bikes, which people say you should buy for reliability. I would say don't buy them for reliability, because there's a chance that there's a part in there or a component in there that's wearing down and on its way out, and that'll be the thing that lets you down. Equally, rider error. A lot of problems always come down to rider error, whether it be whether it's setting off without enough tyre tread, or not checking your oil. And really, we all make those mistakes, but really they are unforgivable, because they're so easy to solve. Checking your oil every day, it should be part of your routine. And that's what I would say really. As you move through your trip, as you ride, just have a morning routine where you just check your oil, you check your chain, just have a look around things, check fasteners, check everything's secure. Do that daily rather than when things go wrong, and then that should hopefully mitigate or reduce the risk of things stopping your trip. So I would certainly say if you feel confident in your bike now, then there's no reason why you won't be able to take that bike wherever you want to go. Equally, there's no way you can prevent all problems on a motorbike trip. Ultimately, something might go wrong, and then it comes down to your ability to remain calm and find a solution, whether it's having to get parts flown in or shipped in, or ringing the roadside recovery, or flagging down somebody with a van, or talking to somebody in a cafe nearby who knows somebody else, and all of a sudden you're fixed. And that's happened numerous times. When Mike turned up to Land's End with his wheel bearings gone on his Tiger, there happened to be a man there who was into bikes, and he saw what the problem was. We loaded the bike into his van. He took him to a bike shop. That afternoon, the bike shop put new bearings in, and Mike joined us later that day. So never give up, I would say, when you get a problem, because there is always a solution, even if it's not present. We've had another guy who got a puncture on a tube tyre down in Perranporth, and we weren't equipped. He wasn't equipped, and there was nothing we could do other than ring recovery. But he asked around, and he found somebody who knew a tyre merchant or a tyre repairer who worked on cars just down the road, and he was able to fit the tyre, no problem at all, or repair the tyre, and he was able to join us again. So, yeah, never give up. Problems happen. They are always curable, generally, apart from alternators and things in the middle of nowhere. But generally, they're fixable. And it's just about being resilient, which is what we talked about yesterday, in the video. Hopefully, the sound on this one's better. I don't want to upset anyone who can't hear it. I don't know. All right, raining outside. We've got a leak inside. And we've got a bike to clean. All right, take it easy. See you soon. Bye.